I used to be a madam. No, this is not a nickname. I was an actual madam. I ran one of the most high-end escort agencies in Manhattan. In fact, my black book, it made a lot of news. It's over 10,000 names, CEOs, politicians, celebrities, men who think they run the world. And for a while, I thought that too. But once you have power, you understand that it's a prison, both metaphorically and literally, because that's where I ended up, in prison because of my connection to former governor of New York, Eliot Spitzer. I provided him with call girls. He got caught. And then, of course, they come for the women and not the men. In this video, I want to share with you how I got started in the industry and some of the things I learned. Most people assume I got started in the industry because I actually worked in it, that maybe I was an escort and then ended up opening my own agency. That would be completely incorrect. I learned about the industry on Wall Street from the finance bros. When I was 17, I got a job. I had already graduated from high school. I got a job at a hedge fund as a trading assistant. And one of the first things the trader that I supported asked me to do was to get him girls. He made a bunch of money and was going to Vegas and wanted to have a fun weekend. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I was like, get you girls. So he gave me the phone number of his VIP host. I called the VIP host. They walked me through the whole thing. And that was my introduction to that world. At that time, hedge funds were unregulated, and I was working for these guys in San Francisco who were like the Wolf of Wall Street in California. It was a lot of money, a lot of excess, a lot of indulgences. And I worked there for 6 years. I saw them use services and the amount they spent. And back then, spending $30,000 a weekend was a lot more money than it is now. I watched them use services. I watched their trader friends invite them to places and then use services. And it was just something that was very common in finance. With a lot of money came a lot of excesses. I also think it's important to point out that these men never looked down on the girls that they used. They were spending a lot of money and they looked at it as something you did when you had a success. We made a bunch of money and we're going to indulge in this. So my idea of that industry was never from a negative viewpoint. I looked at it like, okay, wow, this is what rich guys do. I didn't have any experience around wealthy men. This is what they do. Okay, this is how they celebrate. This is normal. They were never demeaning, derogatory to any of the women. I stayed at that firm for about 6 years, and then I hopped over to another firm as their controller. And then I was recruited for a big, cushy Wall Street job in New York City. My background is derivatives, accounting, performance reporting. So I had a very specific skill set. So I was offered a really great job with a corner office, 40 people reporting to me. And I thought to myself, okay, this is what you're supposed to do with your life. You know, this is obviously the track to success. This is the type of life that people would dream of. So I moved to New York City. But in all honesty, I was miserable. Californians believe in a work-life balance. They have very cushy jobs because all the dot-com companies are competing for employees and they offer all of these perks. So I moved to New York where the expectation on Wall Street was to work 12 to 14-hour days. I didn't see the daylight. I was completely miserable. I didn't have the same level of perks. I hadn't purchased my own breakfast, lunch, or dinner almost for like 8 years in the Bay Area because those were some of the perks that you got. All of a sudden, here I am in Manhattan. Everybody's miserable. Nobody says good morning. And I'm spending, $1,000 every 2 weeks just on my breakfast and lunch because I'm sitting in this office. So I was quickly miserable. The men were misogynistic. It was very apparent that because I didn't have an Ivy League degree, they were always going to look down on me. And then here I am in the back office. I'm looking at all their bills. I'm noticing how many traders are using services and just writing those things off, turning a blind eye for that, which I had done for years. I was the one that checked off on the trader's performance for the funds. And because hedge funds were unregulated, traders were trading in all kinds of things that were not on the stock exchange. And they were coming to me, asking me to fudge their numbers. They weren't actually asking. Let me backtrack on that. They were giving me fake reports, fake contacts to call who would tell me, oh, this is worth 100 million. And I'm researching and I'm doing all the things because it's my signature that goes on these performance reports. And I'm researching and I'm like, this is worth 10 million. And then I'm getting into a fight with either a trader or a portfolio manager saying, listen, that's not the right valuation. You're floating your numbers to deceive the investors. I'm not going to sign off on that. And it got to the point where I had so many conversations with these men, and the expectation for me was for me to just sign off on their bad behavior without asking questions, to deceive people. And I was miserable. I was so miserable. I saw it. I was disgusted by the behavior. At some point, the head of the firm came to me and was like, listen, you got to just sign off on these things. I'm also doing the reporting to the Securities Exchange Commission, the SEC. It's my signature on the reports. I'm absolutely not doing this. And we got into a heated discussion. At the same time, I was reading in the newspaper how former governor of New York, Eliot Spitzer, he was only attorney general then, that he was going around and making arrests of all these agencies. And these people were caught with millions of dollars, 500,000 cash in their apartment. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't realize there was that much money here in New York. I've seen it, but not, on a wide scale. Why am I not doing that? And so every day, as I'm watching their bad behavior, as I'm realizing that I hit the glass ceiling here, I'm never going to be a trader. These guys are making, 2 million, 4 million bonuses every year, and I make $20,000 in a bonus. But that I'm never going to be able to do the things that I wanted to do with that type of career. And more importantly, that I have to co-sign bad behavior from these men, which seems to be a trend in life. I wasn't really sure I was going to open an agency because I didn't know how to run one. And I didn't know enough about the world from the business perspective. One day I went into work because I'm there 14 hours a day, and I put an ad on Craigslist. I wanted to see if that was an avenue towards finding women who might want to work for me. And I had a vision in my head that I wanted to run an upscale agency, the most upscale the world's ever seen, charge a lot of money, work with, women, allow them to set boundaries, make the men understand the importance of their time and feel privileged to get their time. So I placed an ad, beautiful girls wanted. I had a list of things that I thought would be appealing in New York, which was, hopefully education in college, tall, all these things. And so I placed the ad on Craigslist. The next day I came into the office. Immediately when I walked in, they took a Polaroid picture of me and said, we need to see you in this office. I went in there, it was the head of the company and the head of HR. And they said, listen, you're fired. You used the business software for personal use. And I sat there, what do you mean? You know what we mean. Oh, yes, I do. You saw my ad and you don't like it, but all of these men here are surfing sites looking for women. So you're firing me, but you're not going to fire them. They took the Polaroid and they hung it on the wall. And they said, if you ever try to come back in here, we will call the police. As if I would. I went home. I remember waiting for the train. And I thought to myself, you know what? This is a sign. This is God telling you you're supposed to start this agency. It's sink or swim time. Most normal people would probably have said, this has already negatively impacted my life. Maybe I shouldn't do it. I totally get it. I totally know this. Of course, I doubled down because that's what childhood trauma does to you. You double down on bad decisions, but I did. And so I opened an agency. I didn't even wait to find an apartment. In fact, I didn't even have money for an apartment because I owned a home out of state and I had spent all my money renovating it and trying to sell it. So I opened in my own apartment. When I opened, I knew there could be consequences, right? It's an illegal business. I just felt entitled and thought that somehow I was smarter than the system, that I would get out before I got caught. And whenever you're committing a crime, that's pretty much never going to be the case. I feel like only 5 to 10% of the people actually get away with their stuff. And indeed, I was arrested. At my height, I built my agency to having apartments in 5 cities. We had Boston, Philly, DC, New York, 4 apartments in New York. I had 120 women working for me. I was making millions of dollars. My phones were so busy that I opened a call center in Montevideo, Uruguay. so that it would be cheaper and that I could have phone staff and graphic design and all of these things on a full-time 24-hour basis. I could tell a ton of stories about the agency, the crazy life that I led, the money we made, the clients, the calls, the girls, and I will at some point in time. But for the purposes of this video, this is sort of a get to know me and some of the things that I learned. And of course, I learned that you should not commit a crime because you will always get caught. And indeed, I did get caught. Former governor of New York, Eliot Spitzer, was caught with a call girl. And that girl worked for my agency and another agency. And he was caught by the FBI and had to resign. I knew at that time, they went after the first agency at that time, and those people were arrested. I knew at that time it was a matter of time before they came for me. I knew it. I had wire transfers, phone calls. In fact, I had blacklisted this guy from the agency like 2 or 3 times. So I knew it. Everything in my body told me, you're going to get arrested. I lawyered up. I found an attorney. I lawyered up. First, I went to my old attorney, my very lovely attorney who's been with me forever. He told me, Kristen, you don't know they're coming after you. Just close. It's so much harder to catch you if you're not doing anything wrong. And that was not what I wanted to hear because I knew it. I felt it in my being that I was going to get arrested. So I went to another attorney. I paid him $75,000 because I said, listen, you have to find out if they're coming for me. If they are, I want to just turn myself in. What's going to happen? And the system goes after the women and not the men. He told me everything I wanted to hear. I gave him a bunch of my business documents, a copy of my client list, a copy of all the credit card imprints, because I had thousands and thousands of credit card imprints. And then I just waited and nothing happened. And one night he told me, I want you to send me a fax in writing telling me it's okay to start negotiating with you. And I said, why would you say that? Because you've already supposed to have been doing this for 2 weeks. And he said, I'm just worried what might come through the door when I open it. What do you mean? Attorney-client privilege. Nothing should come through the door. But stupid me, naive me. I said, okay. I sent the fax. I'm not kidding you. The next day I was arrested. The SWAT team, 40 or 50 armed officers with guns, with battering rams, with riot gear on. They were at my high-rise apartment. There was a knock on the door. My boyfriend at the time was like, Kristen, it's the SWAT team. What do you want to do? What do you mean? What do I want to do? I'm like 12 floors up. Open the door. Where am I going to go? Shimmy down the fire escape? Of course. Open the door. Open the door. Came in with guns pulled. Look, you're Kristen Davis, the ex-boyfriend. They didn't even ask him his name. They let him just take his laptop that he was on and his cell phones and leave. Wonder who was in on it. We're going to talk about that in a future video. But anyways, they arrested me, shackled me around the waist, around the legs, took me out of the apartment. I looked up. There were multiple helicopters overhead. The whole street was blocked off. There were like 50 police cars out in front, and that was the beginning of the end. It took me, they tried to take me, they went around and searched all of my former apartments, which were closed because I had closed everything. So there was no girls, there was no clients, there was nothing going on. All the websites were down, everything. But they went around and searched them. So like 3 hours later, when they were done, they tried to take me to Rikers. They couldn't take me to Rikers because they didn't have the paperwork. So I spent the night on a bench at a precinct to go to arraignment, and then the next day only to get a $2 million bail, which is unprecedented for that crime. It was the highest ever set. And I went to Rikers and right on into solitary. And that's when I realized that the people in power are corrupt. The intent of putting me in solitary was for me to keep my mouth shut, that I would be so scared that I would never talk about my clients, that they had also seized all of my money and they knew where my offshore money is. There's no such thing as hiding your money anymore because now everything is digital and there's a paper trail. So they knew where my money was, money I had hidden in other people's names, safety deposit box, offshore, they knew it. Now they couldn't take the offshore money, but they knew where it was, and they weren't going to let me out on bail till I agreed to wire transfer it back into the US, which I had to do. So the whole intent on Rikers was to scare me, was to make it to where, and they certainly did that because I signed over my money. I didn't talk about my clients. They certainly did that for a long time. I did come out very angry at the system, and I ran for governor of New York, which started my career in politics. I came out angry at the system that penalizes women and not men. And I met Roger Stone at a radio show then. My star was very big then. I was making a lot of news. His star was little because he was on the tail end of his National Enquirer scandal where he got caught working a presidential campaign and placing ads in a swingers magazine for him and his wife for boy, boy, girl. So he met me. He was looking for a way to make himself look brilliant in politics, to get his name back out there in the media because nobody would write about him. He was ostracized from DC and had to move to Florida. So when I met him, he was like, "You're the most brilliant person I've ever met. I'm your biggest fan." And he lobbied me to run for governor. He lobbied me for a year. And there was a pivotal moment. I was doing a lot of media then, and Geraldo's brother, Craig, called me and said, "Kristen, we want you to come on. We want you to talk about your use of Craigslist in this world because a girl was just killed off of somebody she met off of Craigslist." And I said, "Okay, I'll come on and talk about it." So I'm waiting in the Fox green room. Didn't have time to Google it. So I thought, oh, I'll do it in the green room while I'm there. It was a last minute booking because it had just happened. And I Googled it, and it was Julissa Brisman, a girl who worked for me, one of the 4 women after my arrest that actually reached out to me to see if I was okay. And I was so upset and heartbroken. I almost did the Geraldo show in tears. And I realized at that time, maybe this was my opportunity to advocate for decriminalization because the man, Philip Markoff, who murdered her, he had got caught with dozens of trophies. He had dozens of victims, but none of them called the police because they were too scared of being arrested. So they were victimized by this man and didn't feel like they had any support and couldn't do anything about it. And I was so disgusted by this that I decided I would take Roger up on his offer and run for office. We understood I would never win. It was for a protest candidacy, but I was angry and I wanted to protest. And that launched my now 16-year career in politics, which we can talk about in another video. If you liked this video, please subscribe and leave me a comment.